Hello, everyone. Here we are again, and here we are today on this event organized by the Fundación España, Estados Unidos, and by the INCIPE. And today in this event, we have a good conversation with Senator Tim Kaine, a senator that I have the pleasure to know, that I met in several occasions, and he was the honorary chairman of the U.S.-Spain Council. Senator Kaine is a good friend of Spain. I can guarantee you that. Senator Tim Kaine, as all of you know, was elected to the Senate in 2012 and serves in the Armed Services, Budget, Foreign Relations, and Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committees. Senator Tim Kaine has made boosting job opportunities for everyone always as a top priority. Tim has also led successful efforts in the Senate to reduce unemployment for military families and veterans. As a senator from one of the states most closely connected to the military and the father of a Marine, Tim has focused on crafting a smart defense strategy and reducing the risk of unnecessary war. He works to ensure that the military has the resources it needs to keep the country safe and that service members and veterans receive the benefits and care they have earned. He has also been the leading voice against presidents starting wars without a vote by Congress. Senator Tim Kaine believes that health care is a right, not something reserved just for those who can afford it, and has consistently pushed for reforms to expand access to quality care. This includes legislation to give Americans more options for an affordable health insurance. Tim grew up working in his father's ironworking shop in Kansas City, and his parents taught him the value of hard work and showed him how small businesses and technical skills strengthen his country every day. Tim, when he graduated from the University of Missouri, he started his public service career by running a technical school funded by Jesuit missionaries in Honduras. No wonder he's very good, fluent, and friendly Spanish. There in Honduras, he trained teenagers to become carpenters, welders, equipping them with the skills to lift up themselves and their communities. Senator Tim Kaine was first elected to office in 1994, serving as a city council member and then mayor of Richmond. He became Lieutenant Governor of Virginia in 2002 and was inaugurated as Virginia's 17th governor in 2006. He's married to Ann Halton, who served also as Virginia Secretary of Education from 2014 until 2016, and also as the interim president of the George Mason University from 2019 to 2020. And now teaches education policy at GMU, and both revel today in the adventures of their grown children and continue living in the same Northside Richmond neighborhood where they moved as newlyweds more than 30 years ago. It is a great, great pleasure having Senator Tim Kaine today with us, and it's a great honor for me introducing him to this event organized on a screen from this side, Madrid. Thank you very much. And now, if you allow me, I would leave the screen to Ambassador Manuel Lejarreta, who's going to moderate this conversation and he's going to give us the clues and hints on how this whole thing is going to work. Ambassador Manuel Lejarreta, you're on the screen, not on the floor, but on the screen.
Chairman Juan Lladó, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to participate in this event. Good afternoon, all our attendees in Spain. Good morning, all attendees in the United States. I'm now in Guatemala. I'm just participating from Guatemala, where I'm now, not very far from the land that Mr. Senator Kaine knows very well, as you just mentioned, Chairman Lladó. It's a real pleasure to meet you again, Senator Kaine. And before I give you the floor, let me comment some remarks. First, we'll have, after your speech, around 15-20 minutes for question and answer. Our attendees can start from now on to put the questions either through YouTube, our YouTube channel, the chat of YouTube channel, or either through using the hashtag of our Twitter account. You can see now in the screen, hashtag Potencias EE.UU. And I also want to announce that we'll have the next event of this series of conferences organized by INCIPE and the Fundación on March 25th at 17 hours of Spain, with Deputy Head of Mission of the United States in Spain, Tribal. Now, with the good memories of all of fora that we organized with the U.S. Spain Council and with Senator Tim Kaine, it is my pleasure to give the floor to Senator Kaine. Thank you very much.
Pues, gracias, señor embajador Lejarreta y Chairman Lladó. Es un honor para tener la oportunidad de charlar un poquito con amigos en España y los Estados Unidos hoy. Soy en mi casa en Richmond, casi 100 kilómetros de DC, y inmediatamente después de esta charla, yo voy a viajar a Washington para el Senado durante la semana, pero es una buena oportunidad a conversar un poquito sobre el nuevo capítulo en los Estados Unidos con una administración de un presidente nuevo, President Biden, y vicepresidente Harris. Voy a ofrecer algunas palabras en inglés y otras en español, y yo puedo conversar un poquito en cualquier idioma. But it is very, very good to be with friends. Mis 6 años como jefe del U.S. Spain Council era un tiempo magnífico para Anne, mi esposa y yo. Y siempre es un placer bien fuerte a tener la oportunidad a charlar con amigos en España. Pues es un tiempo bien raro en mi vida. Yo tengo 63 años y yo creo que el año pasado era el año más difícil en mi vida porque de la pandemia. Y primera vez quiero ofrecer mis sentidos de tristeza a todos, porque mucha gente en España y los Estados Unidos han sufrido bastante. Conocemos gente que estamos muertos o ha tenido la enfermedad, y la economía en los dos países está sufriendo todavía. Pero somos gente fuerte y hay razón para esperanza ahorita. It has been a most challenging year, but there is reason for hope. I think I can see luz al fin de túnel, ¿verdad? Light at the end of the tunnel. Here is what I would like my friends in Spain to know about President Biden and Vice President Harris in this new capítulo en nuestro país. Yo creo que la prioridad internacional de este presidente es una palabra: alianza. Alianza. Relaciones con las aliadas de América. Y España es un gran aliada. En la administración de Donald Trump, yo creo que la frase importante era America First, América Primera. A mí me parece que la descripción más justa era América sola, pero en este tiempo de Joe Biden, la cosa más importante es alianza. Como miembro del Comité de Relaciones Exteriores y Comité de Armed Services, siempre ahorita en esta administración estamos hablando sobre la importancia de alianza con países en cualquier parte del mundo. Es importante tener fuerzas armadas que están bien fuertes y tenemos inversiones en diplomacia y apoyo humanitario, pero nunca tenemos un hearing sin mucha discusión sobre el estatus de nuestras aliadas en el mundo, incluyendo España, Europa, las Américas, nuestros aliados en Asia. Mañana, por ejemplo, vamos a tener un hearing sobre alguna gente que están nominados por el presidente Biden por papeles bien importantes en el Pentagon, y vamos a hablar sobre alianza. El primer anuncio de Joe Biden de importancia, en mi opinión, en nuestras relaciones exteriores era un anuncio sobre trabajando juntos con India, Australia y Japón sobre produciendo más vacuna para muchos países en Asia. Era un anuncio que era un ejemplo de esta filosofía de alianza es importante en esta administración. La relación entre los Estados Unidos y Europa era un poquito difícil durante los últimos años, especialmente sobre preguntas como inversión en OTAN, pero otros asuntos también. Pero yo estoy un gran amigo del presidente y vicepresidente, el secretario de Estado, Tony Blinken, y otros oficiales en la administración. Y cuando la pandemia mejora un poquito, todos ellos van a viajar en cualquier parte del mundo para aumentar este sentido de alianza, porque en un mundo de adversarios bien fuertes como China o Rusia o otros, las democracias necesitamos trabajar juntos. El presidente Biden ha dicho que al fin de este año o posiblemente temprano en el año que viene, quiere tener un consejo de las democracias del mundo. Y no solo de las Américas y Europa, pero también democracias en cualquier parte del mundo, África, Asia, Australia, otras partes, para compartir best practices, para decidir cómo puede trabajar de una manera más combinado, compartiendo best practices y trabajando juntos en valores que nosotros compartimos. Y yo creo que este Summit de Democracies va a tener un gran efecto en el mundo, no solo en las democracias, pero en otras naciones que quieren avanzar a democracia. En nuestras políticas domésticas, la cosa más importante es ganar la batalla contra la pandemia. Entonces, la primera propuesta de ley que es importante para esta administración era el American Rescue Plan, el ARP, que el presidente se firmó hace 2 semanas. Casi 2 trillones, no sé la palabra para trillón en español, pero casi $2 trillion de inversión en familias individuales, en nuestras empresas, en nuestro sector de salud y también en gobiernos local y estatal y también nuestro sistema de educación. Estamos invirtiendo esta gran cantidad de dólares para ayudar a la gente que están sufriendo de la pandemia, para ayudar gente y empresas que están sufriendo esa crisis económica, pero también a construir un futuro mejor que el pasado. No queremos regresar al mismo lugar del tiempo antes de la pandemia. Queremos construir un futuro más justo y más sustainable, no sé la palabra, sustainable, no una economía de alta y baja y alta y baja, pero una economía que tiene un tipo de continuación para nosotros y otros países también. En el futuro, después de este ARP, estamos trabajando en un asunto bien importante en España. España tiene una gran cantidad de empresas que son expertos en infraestructura y eso es la prioridad segundo para el Biden administration en nuestra política doméstica. Después de este American Rescue Plan, queremos invertir en infraestructura de cualquier tipo, ferrocarriles, carreteras, puentes, broadband, porque hemos aprendido bastante que sin broadband, gente en nuestro país, especialmente ellos que viven en el campo, no puede compartir en la economía de este siglo. Entonces, vamos a trabajar inmediatamente en este tipo de inversión y yo creo que va a ser bastante oportunidades para empresas españolas porque sus industrias de infraestructura son muchas de las mejores en el mundo. With that, what I'd like to do, Chairman Yao y Mr. Ambassador, again, just express my appreciation. I have not been to Spain for casi 2 o 3 años, but I hope that as we all get a little bit healthier with la vacuna and many more people finding the economy opening up, I hope to welcome Spanish visitors to my Senate office, government officials as they come to visit the White House and the Senate, and I look forward to being with you in Spain. I do think this is a moment of hope after a very, very dark year, including hope that in relying upon our alliances and the relationship between the U.S. and Spain has been a wonderful alliance. We can go stronger. The last thing I'll say before opening up, because I would like to really focus on your questions, is I have we are now in the majority in the Senate. Las demócratas tienen la mayoría. Y como eso, yo soy el chairman of those committees in the Senate that are important. I'm the chairman of the Readiness Committee on Armed Services, which is in charge of every military installation, including those in Spain and around the world, and all of our military industrial base. And as you know, we include in our industrial base contractors like Navantia in Spain, who have provided such good work on shipbuilding and ship repair for the Navy. And so I will be the chairman of the committee dealing with our military installations and military acquisition and industrial base. I'm also the chairman of la Comité de las Américas in el Comité de Relaciones Exteriores, the Western Hemisphere Subcommittee, where I will be the chairman over the entire U.S. relationship with all of the nations from Canada to Argentina, Yukon, Patagonia. And obviously, Spain has so much connection to all of the nations of the Americas that I think being chairman of this committee will give me some excellent opportunity to not only focus on the Americas, but focus on things that the U.S. and Spain can do together with our aliados in Las Americas. So I look forward to that opportunity, and perhaps even some of the discussion today can begin to lead in to opportunities in that space. So with that, Chairman Yalo and Señor Embajador, it's great to be together with you all today, and I'm very, very happy to now take your questions.
Thank you very much, Senator. It has been a pleasure to listen to your interesting remarks and have time enough for questions and answers. We have a first question and it is linked to the recent meeting between United States and China in Anchorage, in Alaska. One of our attendees would like to know if you could offer your assessment about this meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Esta noche tiene una reunión con oficiales de la Casa Blanca para escuchar un poquito a sus pensamientos sobre esta reunión en la semana pasada. Obviously, the headlines and las noticias coming from the summit suggested a good deal of frostiness in the opening set of discussions. And that was not unexpected. I would have predicted that. I think both nations probably felt a need at the beginning of the relationship to be very clear and not, say, nice platitudinous words that don't also explain the realities of challenges in the relationship right now. And I think that from both sides, it was probably sort of setting a level of the challenges ahead. Many of you might be in organizations and you understand this. Sometimes it's a little bit easier at the start of a relationship, even an employment relationship, to be firm and tough at the beginning, and then as parties earn each other's trust, to get a little bit, maybe more cooperative. If you start off too cooperative at the beginning, it can sometimes be hard to get more firm if you needed to. It's usually easier to go the other direction. And so I think both the US and China felt like it was pretty important in that meeting to come in and be firm. We have significant concerns about Chinese trade practices that hurt American businesses, but also hurt businesses in Europe and Canada and Mexico. And we wanted to express that. And we want to work on that together, not just the US against China, but we want to try to work on it together with our allies. We're very concerned about some Chinese military expansionism in Asia, to include island building and other activities that we view as violations of international law. And I think we wanted to state that because we hope to work with our allies in the region to curb that kind of aggression. Recently, a prominent member of the Chinese cabinet, in a speech that was widely reported in China and the United States, indicated that he viewed war with the United States as inevitable. The United States does not believe that is the case. In fact, we think that would be bad for the United States and for China, but especially for the world. We are going to do everything we can to try to accommodate, obviously, a strong, growing, powerful China. That is a reality that's good for the Chinese people. We just want China to fit into a global system where they're following the same rules that Spain follows and that the United States follows about global trade and intellectual property. And so I think we wanted to set the level that we're going to have high expectations, and China has high expectations of us, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I can assure everyone on this call, as a member of the Foreign Relations Committee and Armed Services Committee, we wish China well as it grows into a powerful nation that is integrated into a global system and following global rules. And we have no desire to engage in any military activity with China. In fact, the US and China working together can do some remarkable things around the globe in the area of humanitarian assistance and diplomacy. And I would hope that we might do that.
Thank you. We have another question. A prominent diplomat from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Spain with high responsibilities will like to know what's your view of the future of the relationship between the United States and Venezuela and Cuba.
Thank you for that very challenging question. And estamos hablando en realidad casi cada día con la administración sobre Venezuela y Cuba. Primera vez Venezuela. this situation is extremely difficult para los venezolanos, pero también para naciones como Colombia y otros en Sudamérica que están gran aliadas de los Estados Unidos, especially Colombia, where we've invested significant resources over time. The challenge in Venezuela has been very devastating, will continue to be. Here is the reality, though, that we're being candid about. The previous administration believed that the Maduro government was very close to toppling, and that support for Juan Guaido would hasten the end of the Maduro government. None of the nations in the region around Venezuela thought that was likely the case. I think the previous administration was a little too optimistic, and that the Maduro government would topple. And so I think we need to be realistic about that now. And I would argue that the best thing that the United States can do, together with allies like Spain, allies in Europe, allies in the Americas, organizations like the Organization of American States, is try to provide dramatic humanitarian assistance for Venezuela, but then really work hard with the nations neighboring Venezuela to reduce the negative impact from Venezuela on them. Colombian opposition elements, terrorist organizations like elements of the FARC that were dissatisfied with the peace deal, or EE.UU, the other primary group that's been fighting against the Colombian government for decades. They use Venezuela as a hiding place and haven for criminal and other illegal activity. We see a lot of cyber disinformation coming out of Venezuela, mostly produced by Cubans, Russians, and others to destabilize elections in South America. And so we have been in dialogue with other nations in the Americas about what we need to do to help protect them and shore them up. I don't think it is likely that the Venezuelan government of Maduro is going to topple anytime soon. And expecting that to happen is probably unrealistic. But if we can help neighboring nations and then work together with allies to provide significant humanitarian assistance for the Venezuelan people, at least those two things we should do very vigorously, and then look for opportunities for negotiated settlement. I believe you're going to start to see the Venezuelan opposition and others in the region come together for a unified call for free and fair elections in Venezuela in the near future. Getting nations to support that is probably a really important priority. On Cuba, there's significant difference of opinion still in Cuba. I'm of the opinion that it was very smart for the United States under the Obama administration to normalize relations with Cuba and establish an embassy in Cuba and begin to reduce the sanctions and the boycotts of Cuba. I will say I'm disappointed. I don't think the results in Cuba have been satisfactory. And in fact, I continue to believe that Cuba's human rights record, particularly when it comes to anyone in the political dissident space, the human rights record is horrible. But I've always believed that you don't establish diplomatic relations. It's not a good housekeeping seal of approval. It's not the United States saying everything is fine in Cuba or any nation. You have diplomatic relations to abrir una puerta para diálogo. And having relations does that. But we have been very, very disappointed about the absence of progress. Now, some of the absence of progress, in my view, was because the Trump administration kind of took a more hardline position, and I don't think that helped. But I think what you'll see the Biden administration do is continue to have this diplomatic relation, continue to raise asuntos de derechos humanos in Cuba, to press for reforms. So, for example, if Americans of Cuban descent mandar apoyo a sus familias en Cuba, el gobierno de Cuba toma un gran porcentaje de los remittances y las familias en Cuba reciben un poco. No other country in the world takes as much from remittances to family members as Cuba does, and that's just unjust and unfair. So we hope to work together on some smaller priorities like that, and if we can make progress, posiblemente los dos lados pueden tener un avance de trust, and then we can find more path forward.
Senador, siguiendo con los temas de América Latina, que como usted sabe muy bien, para España son importantísimos, todo lo que sucede en América Latina nos afecta mucho, y también para la Fundación Consejo España Estados Unidos tenemos como mandato prestar atención y reforzar las relaciones con la comunidad americana de origen hispano. Uno de los fundadores de la Fundación, Emilio Casinello, pregunta cómo ve usted las relaciones Estados Unidos con México y también en términos generales, ¿qué va a hacer la nueva administración Biden con la comunidad hispana / latina?
Pues la relación con México es un poco rota ahorita, pero con una gran oportunidad a mejorar la relación, porque durante los últimos años de la administración pasada no tenía una relación muy fuerte en asuntos de diplomacia. En trade, México y los Estados Unidos están bien conectados, especialmente después de mejorando the NAFTA with the US-Canada-Mexico deal. So, las economías de nuestros países son bien común, por gracias a Dios, pero en los asuntos de diplomacia, inmigración, trabajando juntos contra narcotraficantes y otros problemas de seguridad en el hemisferio, necesitamos hacer mucho más. Pero Joe Biden, como vicepresidente, era siempre visitando México y los otros países en las Américas, y yo creo que México, otros países tienen un tipo de confianza en Biden y Tony Blinken y los otros oficiales como Roberta Jacobson, que está trabajando con el presidente Biden ahorita. Entonces yo creo que esta relación es muy, muy importante porque trade and immigration y tantos otros asuntos. En nuestra comunidad latina dentro de los Estados Unidos hay tanto que hacer. Primera vez, este American Rescue Plan era bien importante porque la comunidad latina aquí está sufriendo más que todo en la pandemia. La gente que está enferma, un gran número, un gran porcentaje son latinos. Gente que están muriendo son latinos. Empresas que están sufriendo son empresas con dueños latinos. Entonces, acción inmediatamente con el Rescue Plan va a ayudar la comunidad latina bastante, pero la comunidad también quiere por fin un reforma integral de inmigración. Estamos tratando de hacerlo por años. Cuando yo venía al Senado en 2013, tuvimos un acuerdo bipartidista en el Senado, pero en la Casa de Representantes republicanos no quieren apoyar este tipo de reforma. Entonces, estamos ahorita esperando más que 35 años desde la última reforma del sistema de inmigración. Entonces, los latinos y organizaciones latinas en los Estados Unidos quieren ver progreso, no solo palabras, pero progreso a una reforma integral, seguridad en la frontera, protección para dreamers, un sendero a ciudadanía para los indocumentados que están viviendo aquí, ayuda para nuestras empresas para recibir obreros con visas especiales para ayudar sus empresas. Y yo estoy trabajando duro con un grupo de senadores bipartidistas ahorita hallar un tipo de reforma. Presidente Biden ha ofrecido eso. Y eso es no solo para los latinos, ¿verdad? Tenemos nuevos americanos de cualquier parte del mundo y necesitamos una reforma, pero yo creo que el mensaje de nuestra comunidad latina en apoyo de una reforma es bien fuerte ahorita y yo estoy seguro que esta administración va a trabajar bien duro a hallar un acuerdo bipartidista en eso.
Thank you. In a different tone, one of our attendees who introduced herself as chairman of the Permanent Commission of the Movement of the Red Cross, would like to ask you if you could elaborate a little bit more on what you said about more investment in diplomacy and humanitarian affairs.
Yes, Mr. Ambassador, I think this is very important, and thank you to the questioner, because the work of the Red Cross in the United States and globally is so very, very important. Here is where we were during the Trump administration. Every year, the president would send us a budget, and it would usually propose cuts to the State Department budget and USAID by about 30%, cutting diplomacy, cutting humanitarian assistance. Now, that would be the administration's proposal. The good news is usually Congress, y no solo demócratas, republicanos también, podemos trabajar juntos a pelear contra los cuts y podemos invertir en un nivel igual a años pasados en asuntos de diplomacia y apoyo humanitario. But we didn't advance. We just held our own. And in some key areas, for example, global health, preparing to fight a pandemic, working together with global organizations like the WHO, we actually did retreat during the Trump years because, as I pointed out earlier, there was a little bit of a América sola, no América primera, pero América sola. I think this administration completely understands that our strengths rely heavily on our allies, our alliances, but also on the strength of international organizations. So take vaccine development. The announcement that we made in the last few weeks with India, Australia, and Japan, that we're going to invest significantly in vaccine development in India to provide more vaccines in India, but also with additional vaccines that can be used all throughout Asia. I think it's smart for the United States. If more people in the world are vaccinated, it helps protect Americans abroad, and it helps protect Americans at home as people travel around the world. But it also shows a new commitment to these kinds of joint efforts in the humanitarian space. President Biden has not submitted to us his first budget yet. We think we're going to get it within the next couple of weeks. Normally, presidents submit their budgets to Congress in February, but usually in a president's first year, when they come in and have to put it together from scratch, it takes a little bit longer. My intuition, no tengo evidencia para eso, pero my intuition says that you're going to see a budget from the Biden administration that will start to, you won't see cuts to diplomatic and humanitarian aid, and you won't see it stand still. You'll start to see us advancing to reintegrate with organizations like the WHO and others and put more resources into these multinational and international efforts because they're good for the United States and they're good for nations around the world.
Thank you for your very inspiring and rewarding words. Another question, one of our attendees would like to know, he says that in 2023 will mark the 17th anniversary of the Madrid Agreements, a set of agreements which reset Spain-US relations for decades. He wonders whether we will have plans to commemorate this milestone in bilateral relationships. So this is, well, a very concrete question. about these 70 years of relations that started with these agreements in 70 years ago. What do you think?
That's 2023, ¿verdad?
Se está refiriendo, creo, a los pactos. Sí, a los pactos que en los 50, digamos, pusieron en marcha las relaciones entre España y Estados Unidos en la década de los 50, que hubo unos acuerdos importantes entre España y Estados Unidos. Se pregunta
Pues,
si podríamos tener algún tipo de evento o de recuerdo para hacer balance de estos 70 años de relaciones fructíferas.
No, era una buena idea, y yo voy a hablar con la Casa Blanca y mis colegas en el Comité de Relaciones Exteriores sobre eso. Ahorita, inmediatamente, estoy ayudando a la organización de The Summit of the Americas este año. Para la primera vez en más que 25 años, este Summit es en los Estados Unidos en 2021. Y también este Summit of Democracies en el mundo va a ser en 2021 o 2022. Pero una pregunta bien importante sobre celebrando la relación entre España y los Estados Unidos. Y yo voy a hablar con el equipo en la Casa Blanca, porque estoy de acuerdo. Es importante tener un tipo de evento o celebración para escribir un capítulo en el futuro sobre la relación también. Y si yo puedo trabajar juntos con el Consejo o con miembros de la Asamblea de Legislación, las parliamentarians en España, quiero trabajar juntos en eso.
Por supuesto, la Fundación está abierta a todo tipo de colaboraciones. You referred just some minutes ago about this summit of democracies that the Biden administration is trying to organize, and this has raised many expectations. Yeah. But on the other hand, some commentators, some people think that this has also some risks, because what do you mean by democracies? Who is going to invite Washington for this summit?
Mr. Ambassador, that's an excellent question, and frankly, in the hearings that we've been having in the Foreign Relations Committee, we've been asking the same questions. Actually, the committee that I chair is the Committee on the Americas and on Global Democracy. So I have a feeling that I'll be very involved, certainly in supporting the summit, possibly attending and participating in it, possibly in giving the White House advice about how to do it. And the issue of who should be invited is a really important one. I don't think the invitation, if it's going to be a true summit of equals, democracies who are proud of our democratic forms of government, but willing to look in the mirror and be self-critical about ways we can improve. If it's going to be an assembly of equals, then it shouldn't just be the United States that decides who comes. There should be criteria other than just we're going to invite who we want. And so, for example, as I'm thinking about the question, I look at Freedom House's annual democracy index, or The Economist does an annual democracy index where they sort of analyze the state of every nation around the world, and they tend to divide them into, democracies or, striving democracies or authoritarians. And I hope that we will use some kind of international benchmark that compels respect all over the globe to decide who should be invited, rather than just having it be, nations that the US feels good about at a particular moment. We'll have some interesting challenges. I mean, I was on the phone today earlier with administration officials talking about the question of Taiwan, a very vibrant electoral democracy. China would be very, very unhappy if Taiwan were to be invited. But Taiwan, in almost all of the international measures, does very well on pro-democracy scores. So we're going to have decisions like that. But the bottom line answer is, I hope the administration will use international benchmarks to do the invitations, because then I think the summit will compel more respect and frankly more attendance than if it were just, you know, seen as something that the US was making its own decisions about who should be invited.
Thank you. Although we are very much more interested in the future, looking to the future than looking to the past is also very important. And in this sense, we would like to know your view about the legacy of President Trump time. How could you read this his presidency? Is it going to let an important imprint in United States? So, what can you tell us about that?
Well, Mr. Ambassador, I'm going to be very candid. I mean, I am extremely critical of the Trump administration as an administration that, in my view, was very contrary to the best values of the country. But I'm not critical of everything the administration did. Anytime I'm critical, I'm going to try to be at least fair and point out some good things. So actually, let me say a couple of good things, and then I'm going to answer your question directly about the legacy going forward. I think the Trump administration wisely recognized that policies of both Democratic and Republican administrations to integrate China more into the global order of rules and regulations had failed. I think Democratic and Republican administrations since the Nixon administration believed that incorporating and integrating China more into global norms and rules would help Chinese and make China less of an outlier and more of a productive player. But I think the Trump team wisely recognized that we were not having the results that we wanted. Now, what the Trump administration often did with respect to China, I found foolish, but I think their recognition of a reality was necessary. The Trump administration helped it toward the end of the administration broker what I consider to be some very positive normalization relationships between Gulf state and Arab nations and Israel that I think over the long term will make the region safer. And I give them credit for that. And there are other areas as well that I think where I could find some things to say that are positive or people who did good work. However, the Trump administration's real legacy, in my view, is going to be pushing away allies to try to go it alone in a way that made America weaker, not stronger, backing away from diplomatic deals like the Paris Climate Accord or the JCPOA with Iran that made America weaker, not stronger. Horrible mishandling of the coronavirus pandemic because of a mixture of anti-science attitudes, poor communication, focusing upon it as a political challenge rather than a humanitarian or health challenge. I think the Trump administration's mishandling of coronavirus, in my view, will go down as maybe the worst failure of domestic governance in the history of our country. As we approach now nearly 600,000 dead, it didn't have to be that way. I mean, it would have been tough, but we probably could have gotten through it with 100 to 200,000 people dead. And instead, the mishandling of it led to needless death and illness. But then that also has had a much more profound effect on the American economy than need be. So while there are some positives, I think overwhelmingly, and this was expressed so palpably in the attack on the Capitol on January 6th, the Trump administration was characterized by an anti-science attitude, an anti-allies attitude, a selfish and narcissistic attitude, and often even bigotry in a way that was very contrary to the values that I think are the most important values of our country. The legacy question you ask is an interesting one because, as you say, we're more interested en el futuro que en el pasado. Entonces, yo he explicado algunos problemas con la administración en el pasado, pero ¿qué es el futuro de Donald Trump o su filosofía en nuestra política ahorita? And that's a really important question. I don't believe Donald Trump is going to run for president again. But I do think his influence is still the most powerful influence in the Partido Republicano. And so what you see in the Republican Party is un tipo de guerra civil dentro del Partido Republicano contra los que son apoyantes fuertes de Donald Trump y otras personas que quieren tomar una dirección nueva. And you'll see that internal batalla in the Republican Party play out over the next few years. And I don't really know how it's going to be solved. But I think Donald Trump's influence as a person is going to wane, but some of his philosophies, anti-immigrant, kind of an anti-elite, anti-science attitude, you'll probably continue to see those puntos de vista tienen un esfuerzo en el Partido Republicano. No estoy seguro si lo demás, la población general, va a apoyar la filosofía, but it's going to be interesting over the next few years to see how the Republican Party works out its own internal divisions.
Muchas gracias, senador. We are running out of time, but if you allow me, I will pass 2 more questions. Is it okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The first one is a very particular question, a very concrete question. Is about Morocco. One of our attendees asked why the United States is investing in infrastructure and trade and an important help in Morocco. It means military help, military cooperation. As you know, Morocco is our neighbor for sure, and we have a very good relation, but everything related to Morocco is of the utmost interest for Spain. So we know relationship between Morocco and Washington are strengthening, and this attendee would like to know a little bit more about your assessment in this issue.
Let me answer that one quickly. The U.S.-Morocco relationship is also a very strong one. We both nations celebrate that Morocco was, virtually the first nation, the Kingdom of Morocco, that recognized the United States después de independencia, and we celebrate that relationship, and it's strong. The Trump administration took an action at the end of the administration, I'm sure the questioner knows, to sort of jump ahead of the international effort to find an agreement about the Western Sahara. And the Trump administration just sort of recognized Morocco's claims over the Western Sahara in a fairly transparent trade for Morocco normalizing relationships with Israel. The Biden administration is still grappling with what it thinks about that Trump policy. It's not been completely retracted, but I will say virtually all of the changes that the Trump administration made on domestic or international policies in the last 6 months of the administration are being reviewed very carefully by the Biden administration. And I don't have a prediction right now about where the Biden team will go about it. I've asked about it. The White House knows I'm interested. With all the issues on the table, they're still working it through. And obviously, the decision that the Biden administration makes will have a significant bearing on the relationship we have with the Moroccan government, who was very happy with the Trump administration position. So I acknowledge the question asked by the questioner, and you're right. We have a great relationship with Morocco, but they're not a neighbor as they are for Spain. A mere 50 o 60 kilómetros de España. Entonces es importante para ustedes, y yo creo que la administración va a tomar una dirección en la relación with Morocco soon, but I don't have a prediction about that right now.
And a very small comment: is there any plan to revert this recognition by the United States of Sahara as being a part of integral part of Morocco?
The question is, there's not now a plan to revert, but the administration is trying to, I think they're trying to explore what is the right step. So I would say, you know, until we hear from the administration, I think they're looking at all options. I don't think they have made a final decision about this yet. If they have made it, they have not told me, but I don't think they've made a final decision yet.
So, last question, última pregunta, senador, y pareciera que volvemos al comienzo de este evento, pero no vamos a volver. Era, el título del evento era What is now at stake in the US? So, in this sense, I would like to know what's really at stake. Is it the real spirit of America? Is it its leadership? It's willing to be the leadership of the world? What's in broad terms? What would you say? What is at stake now in the US?
I would say, no, una pregunta bien importante. I would say that yes, the role of American leadership in the world is at stake. There are those of us who are committed to an international order of democratic allies working together with the US playing a major leadership role, but we don't define that leadership role to mean the United States dictates the terms of the Summit of Democracies or our alliances, but that we use our peculiar set of strengths, which are notable, to advance the cause of democracy and good relations and peace between neighbors around the world. That is at stake. And I would say, Mr. Ambassador, that we realize that we can be the most helpful in that if we can be strong internally. If we're divided internally, politically divided, if we are economically not as strong as we can be, if we're not as committed to our own democratic values, free press, freedom of expression, a vigorous but peaceful, ultimately peaceful political debate, if we're not committed to being a good example, then we're not going to be strong in a global leadership position. So I think it was important that the Biden administration first tackle the pandemic crises of both health and the economy to strengthen our own internal resolve. And if we can do that, we can then play an important role globally. I don't think we need to be the indispensable nation, in the words of Secretary Albright. I don't think we need to go around loudly proclaiming that we're the exceptional nation, but I always challenge my colleagues, let's try to be exemplary and just live up to the values we proclaim. We're much more likely to be indispensable or exceptional if we try to be exemplary than if we try to be indispensable and exceptional. So let's just live up to what we say about ourselves with internal strength. And if we do, we will be much more likely to play the kind of global leadership role that I think the world still needs.
Thank you. It has been an amazing conversation, Senator Kaine. It has been a really very interesting, and I'm sure our attendees have enriched themselves with so many brilliant comments and inspiring ideas. So looking forward to meeting you again. Now I give the floor, or as he said before, the screen, to Chairman Juan Lladó just to close this event. Thank you.
Senator Tim Kaine, senador, muchísimas gracias. Como presidente de la Fundación España, Estados Unidos y del INCIPE, es de verdad un honor haberte escuchado. Y como ciudadano del mundo, escucharte hoy con franqueza y determinación es un lujo, de verdad. Thank you very much, Senator Tim Kaine. It was a great honor and a great pleasure.
Mil gracias a todos, y yo tengo una esperanza que este año 2021 va a ser un año de alianza entre España y los Estados Unidos y otras democracias en cualquier parte del mundo, y espero que podamos trabajar en persona en el futuro bien prontito.
Seguro que sí. Muchísimas gracias, senador.
Chao.
Adiós.
Hasta luego.